What's up, everybody?
Woo.
Happy weekend. We are live here at the Business Temple podcast where we talk about the union of ancient philosophy and modern business. This is your co host, Super Alex.
And your co-host Super Ray, ready
What's
to
up?
take on the day. Let's get it. What's up, Alex? I'm so happy to be with you here today and talk about all things amazing, sexy, a topic
Mm-hmm.
that might be boring to some but exciting for others. Because what are we talking about today, Alex?
We are going to talk about contracts, business contracts. And I love how you said it's boring to some, but not to others. And the boring to some thing, I was one of those people. I never used to read contracts. And I've got a couple of stories up my sleeve this
Ooh.
episode about how that affected me personally and my company. And I'm sure I've got a lot to learn from you too, Ray, because I know you keep your contracts airtight.
Oh, absolutely. I think I'm falling in that camp where I love contracts just because of
Just
how
because.
there's no room for ambiguity. There's no room for errors. You just have
Mhm.
something written out and then provided. And once you sign that dotted line, you know what you're getting yourself into. I am a
Absolutely.
strong believer in contracts. I think that everybody should have them, no matter who you are, whoever you're doing business with, whether it be your mother, whether it be your friend, would be your brother or sister. It doesn't matter. Contracts are an essential part of business. Don't forget your contracts. And I'm excited to get this started. But let's play them in and do our little get everybody hyped because contracts are
Absolutely.
not the sexiest thing to talk about, but I sure do love them.
I thought it was funny as hell when you gave your mom as an example. You're the same, bro. I definitely have a contract with my mother. You know what I mean? But before we get into it, make sure to smash that like button, bitch slap that subscribe button over here on our YouTube channel at Business Temple Podcast. Not only that, but we have additional episodes where we first started on Clubhouse. You will find that description on the link below. All of that is over there. And we do this every single Saturday, 9 a.m. PT, 12 p.m. ET. We are consistent, hyping y'all up for the weekend, making sure y'all start your weekend right. Let's
That's right.
go.
Let's go. Let's get that weekend started. For all you entrepreneurs out there that are taking that break to learn about what you need to do for the business, the weekend is the right time to do so. We are so busy during the week. And that's why I think Saturday is a perfect time to start
Yep.
prepping yourself, just getting yourself ready for what's to come for the week. So I think we picked the right time, bro. Let's
Absolutely.
get it.
Absolutely. Keeping people sharp. Don't slip, even if it's the weekend. Keep yourself sharp. And that's what we do here at the Business Temple. Iron sharpens iron. So let's do this. All right. Now let's get to the paperwork. Let's make sure it's exciting for everybody. You know how it
Ooh.
is here. We keep it high energy, high octane all the time. Now, where do we begin? Shall we start with what is a business contract? What's needed in it? What are some examples? Let's kick them off, Super Ray.
Let's go. Let's go. Okay. I want to just start off with that with a question. I always like starting off with a question. I want to
Let's
ask
go.
you, what, in your words, what is a, a business contract or a contract in general? What it is to you?
So I'm just gonna come up or not come up, but lay down the words that come up straight in my head. Number one is protection.
Hmm.
That's number one. And number two, it ensures a formal partnership for your company and whoever it is you're partnering up with, whether it's a business partner, a vendor, or an angel investor and stuff like that. Contracts are absolutely one of the most important foundations that you could have for your business. Now, I actually didn't learn this right away when I started because I had no knowledge at all about contracts or business administration for that matter. And so this episode will really help me come full circle into exactly what I learned about having contracts. That's where I'm starting out with, man. What about you? What are contracts?
Hmm. You hit the nail on the head. I want to say that, yeah, a contract is a sort of protection. And then when you say that, I'm starting to think about how contracts are like condoms. You don't stick your
Oh
thing
man.
in anything without protection. You go ahead and put that protection on before you lay in bed with anyone or anyone you're trying to go into business with. And they come in different types of
Absolutely agree.
flavors, all types of flavors. And you just got to pick the right one, which one you need for the right occasion. So make sure you use that protection anytime you get into bed or into business with anyone.
Absolutely. Make sure there are no breaches in that
That is
contract as
true.
well.
You don't want no holes in that condom.
No. That should have been the title of the episode. My bro. Why
I
did
told you we were
pick
going to
that?
make contracts sexy.
That's right. That is right. Okay. I absolutely agree with that. You know what I mean? Contracts are like condoms. No matter who you get in bed with, you always got to put that rubber on.
Yeah.
Always got to lay down that paperwork. Oh my
Mhm.
God, that is probably the sexiest thing I've ever heard about contracts. My bro, you are so much better than ChatGPT coming up with this type of content. My God. All right, let's go
Yeah.
then. All right, what about the contract? What's needed?
Mhm.
How do you detect a good contract? How do you ensure a good contract? And more importantly, how do you detect a bad one?
Yeah.
That's what's extremely important. So I know you've got experiences with contracts, Ray. I do as well. I'm not sure my experience is as deep as yours, coming from where I actually did business, but you know what? Why don't I start? Because I'm sure you've got some pretty good stuff to say
Go for
about
it.
it.
Go for it. Yeah,
So
yeah.
I
No.
started out an entrepreneur 7 years ago, and a little bit of context for those watching. I did not, I came into entrepreneurship with little to no experience at it at all. And it was not until I think it was anywhere between 6 months to a year in, where I finally found someone to work with on LinkedIn. His name is Ali. Shout out to Ali. And he actually helped me kind of build the systems and the core foundations in my company called I Influence Institute. Now, one of the most important things Ali had done for the company was to draft contracts so that when we work with third parties, or when we work with our clients, he drafted all those contracts, because I assumed I couldn't close any corporate accounts because my contracts weren't airtight. So that's lesson number one right there already. If you're trying to work, if you have a service and you're trying to work with a corporate client, they can deny accepting your service if the contract is just not it's just not good.
Mhm. That is true.
So
Mhm.
it's one way to actually lose a sale. That's one thing. That's the first thing that I learned about contracts.
Yeah.
That
You
if
cannot.
it's not, if you don't speak the language, if you don't know don't know how to comprehend a contract, if you don't know how to, how to edit a contract, or get some professional eyes to look at the contracts that you create, then it's going to be difficult for you. Not only is it going to be difficult, but you personally might, especially as a sole proprietor, you
Mhm.
personally liable for any breaches of the contract. So my experience has been a tricky one with that. Luckily enough for me, I didn't get into, I wouldn't say too much, but I didn't get into any trouble. So a little bit of context. I started I Influence Institute in Manila, Philippines. Now
Mhm.
it's very different from over here with Ray over in New York. Like, a lot of people sue each other here in New York. You know what I mean? The Philippines, not too much, but I'm sure there were definitely times where I should have been fucking sued. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Yep. I'm saying that on air. But that's how important it is. You know what I mean? If there's a bunch of breaches and holes in your contract, that's where you'll probably end up, in court, being
Yeah.
sued. It's tough. It's tough out there,
You'll
yo.
end up with a third party involved.
Hmm. Hmm. So what do you
Well,
got for us, Ray?
no, I'm actually intrigued to listen a little bit more about
Hmm.
like your relationship and your understanding of contracts, because sometimes people do mistakenly think that business is all just word of mouth. It's all about who you know and who you're talking to, and trying to uh, make a deal, make business with. But the thing is, if it's not on paper, it doesn't exist. That's the
Right.
difference between the way I think of business relationships versus someone that, let's say, doesn't really believe in contracts, doesn't have contracts, and just does business with anybody and just raw dogging all over the place.
Raw
But
dog.
if you write it and put it on paper, it's tangible. You can use it to protect not only yourself but the other party that you're doing business with. And one thing for me, when I started thinking about contracts, the reason I started thinking about contracts was because whenever you get employed by an employer, you get an employment contract, and in that employment contract, it states specifically what like your job roles is, what you're gonna get, what the salary is that you're gonna make, and
Hours
what
of
is
work.
hours of work, what are your protections, what are some of the things that you are responsible for, and then terms and conditions of termination or things like that. It's the same thing when you're working with someone, and let's say now when you're having an employer and employee relationship, you have to have that in line because there's no ambiguity here. Like you said, in the United States, it is an important aspect.
Yep.
Is an important aspect because breach of contract is one of the most popular way of losing business, and one of the most popular way to suing people for over a dispute of undelivered goods or undelivered products, things like that. So breach of contracts are it's a big business. I think if anybody wants to get into the contract business, they're going to make so much money, and this is why divorce lawyers make so much money.
I have not thought about it that way. Breach of contracts are big businesses.
Yeah.
Holy shit, that was mind blowing, bro. Like
It
the way
is.
I'm processing that was a good one.
It is because essentially what a contract is for is for protection, and if each party are getting into bed and they don't know what they're getting themselves into, it's like if we go into bed and you give me AIDS, what now?
I don't even know how to respond to that.
I didn't use protection. I got burned, and let's say now what am I supposed to do? I can't take you to court, I can't take you to do anything. But if there was a contract in between, and if there was some sort of protection between one another, now you understand, okay, this experience was meant to be enjoyable, and even though that experience is no longer enjoyable because of what you brought to the table, I wasn't expecting
dispute
that.
resolution now.
Yes. I can't stop thinking about this analogy right now, but this is what I mean.
All the sexual innuendos about contracts.
This is what I mean. I always make sure to get a contract in place, no matter when it comes to employer and employee. But going back to what I was saying, that's where I first started learning about contracts, is between that relationship. When you think about the employee and employer, who has the most leverage here, though? Would you think an employer or an employee in that in the
from
contract?
my experience, a lot of employer-employee contracts, a lot of it is one-sided to the employer. So I would say definitely the employer has a lot of the leverage there.
Exactly.
And so it puts you in a kind of a bad position to really negotiate things, and I feel like some employers, they create contracts in the form of a hard pill to swallow.
Mm-hmm. Like you just.
I'm just trying to put a sexual innuendo in there.
You just have to take it how it is. Imagine you as an employee, you came in with your own contract that was like, this is what I expect. So there's a difference. This is when it comes to contract negotiations. This is why I feel like any job you take, anything that you go into, any employment, you have leverage. If you are a desired employee, I would say you could have leverage in negotiating contracts, negotiating your salary, taking the contract and changing it to benefit both parties. Is not just, okay, it should never be one-sided. And I think that's what it's an important aspect of learning about contracts, understanding contracts, what you're getting into. And that, for me, that kind of sparked that idea. So when I started my business, I was like all about contracts, all about understanding even terms of services. When you go on a website, you see, okay, what information can we gather? What information can be shared? What information can be sold? You click that button every single time you sign up for a free app and say, hey, sell my data. I don't give a fuck. And that, to me, is what's crazy, that we live in an age where we use contracts as a tool to allow the one party to have so much power, and then not provide that, not give that power back to the people. And the people themselves are what makes businesses. The people themselves are what makes these companies. So when you think about contracts, it's it goes beyond just, I guess, employee where I started. It just gives you a better understanding of how things work, and you don't want to get screwed over. You never want to get screwed over. What you're not, you want to be doing the screwing if you're an entrepreneur, not get screwed over. I man, I have so many contracts in place with my business partners. I make sure that it's everything written in stone. One thing I would say too, if you have a verbal agreement, put it in a contract too. That's not
Yes,
enough to hold up in court.
I agree with that. Absolutely agree with that. And building off what you said, Super Ray, I think contracts, it's very important, more so because it determines that you get what you want and you need for your company to thrive.
Yeah.
And it's extremely important, like what you said earlier, that it's not a one-sided thing. I believe great contracts are contracts that are win-win situations for both parties. And not only that, but if it does happen where there's a breach of contract or if there's a dispute, there are dispute resolutions within the contract.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very important that, let me know what you think about this, Super Ray. It's very important that you lawyer up every time you get every time you're working with a new business partner or an existing business partner and you're signing a new contract. It's important to lawyer up. Yay or nay?
It depends. I would say it depends, because if it's you're talking about, I would think it would depend on the amount, because
Okay.
I don't think it necessarily is needed to have a lawyer for every interaction. I think lawyers are there more so as a arbiter, more like trying to look at the details. If you don't understand contracts, then yes, I would say if you're new to business, if you're new to understanding contracts, a lawyer is a good essential piece of let's say a resource, if you do have the money for it, that can find these small details in the contract that you might necessarily not catch, like just the changing of a word of for, to, or even just the slightest misstep in the transcribed name of your company or anything like that, that can be pretty much dismissed in court because it doesn't fall within the confines of what is within you're speaking of. So let's say, for example, if you're signing a contract that says you and your partner are, the contract that you was initially agreed to was 50% partnership. Yet there's a mistype on the contract that says one of you owns 51% and the other one 49%.
49.
And like it's in there somewhere, and you miss it. You just don't read it. You just sign it. You just trust your friend. That 51% now means that your friend is now the sole owner of that business
because he has the highest equity.
Yeah, exactly. And he has all the decision making power in the eyes of the law. If you own 51% of the company, you're pretty much the owner. You're not a partner at that point. So now that partnership that you thought you got yourself into and that you didn't read, and that's like literally what contract is. You just missed it by 1%. That's all you need to do, and you're pretty much fucked at that point.
Exactly. Like that one moment determines so much. You know, it's got so much impact on present and future business. Yeah. And so when I started, when finally I started working with my friend Ali, and he started drafting these contracts, I figured there were so much loopholes as to how I was being bent over and screwed. You know what I mean? It was just so bad. I'm trying to recall some of those loopholes, but one being one reoccurring loophole would have been timelines. Now I work in a particular industry where timelines are extremely important. That is the learning and development industry. Timelines and performance, very important. And so in contracts, or our contracts, the one that I used to dispense, it did not have very, very specific timelines. And so one of the most important things there for me was getting those specific expiration dates, timelines, and also exit strategies. I would like to say is a very important part of a contract as well. Say, for example, you enter into a business partnership. For example, you and me, Ray, it's a fair contract. But let's say, hey, I'm not, this is not aligned to me anymore. I don't feel like doing this certain business venture with you anymore. It should be in a contract. There should be a proper exit strategy within that contract.
Yeah.
So I think that's absolutely important as well
It
to consider.
eliminates the need for dispute, and it also does eliminate the need for lawyers, to be honest, because you have it clearly stated that this is what's going to occur based off of if, let's say, you didn't deliver on time, or if the product that you produce isn't up to spec. One thing I want to ask, Alex, is there any particular contracts you think we as entrepreneurs should be looking at, should be focused more on? Because I think we're talking contracts in general, but let's narrow it down a little bit and talk about specific contracts. What do you think are some of the top important contracts that you should look at? Which ones you should be aware of and most familiar with?
So one of the most important things for me, especially the way I operate now, is becoming a limited liability company or an LLC. Why is that extremely important or super important for entrepreneurs? Number one, because it puts you personally and your personal assets out of the way. So when you do enter into a contract, you're working with the company, iInfluence Institute or Your Voice New York. That is who is being identified in the contract, not Ray Martez or Alex Padron. So for me, that's number one things that's very important when reading a contract or when putting yourself in a contract. If you got a limited liability company, I highly recommend it because it protects you. It protects you personally and your personal assets as well. So that's one for me. What about you?
I mean, honestly, yeah, that is the top one for me as well. When it comes to building your business and creating a business, their limited liability set up with, and it's basically your contract with yourself and the government, letting them know that this is a separate entity, this is a separate business. Once you establish your business, familiarize yourself with contracts like a bill of sales. I have a whole list. Amendments, non-disclosure agreements, partnership agreements, purchase orders.
Oh yeah, all that. I didn't even think of that.
Statements of work. All these are contracts that you should familiarize yourself with before you even get into business, to be honest, because these are all the things that you're going to need in order to have a secured method of doing business with somebody else. But yeah, absolutely. When establishing your LLC, there's a lot of paperwork you have to go through.
Oh, definitely.
Even establishing your IEN number, which is basically your company's social security number.
Yeah.
It's something that you need to make sure that you get into place before you are considered an established business in the eyes of the government. So make sure you get that done ASAP. That's like the first contract you need to do. So yeah,
exactly. and don't just browse through it and sign. I know a lot of entrepreneurs out there, especially startup entrepreneurs, like they're just so excited to keep moving, so excited to move the needle. Just remember that these contracts have potential to stop the needle altogether in the future if you don't get this right today.
Yes.
So absolutely. Very, very, very important. What I do, where I find my contracts, where I draft my contracts presently, is a company called Zen Business. So Zen Business actually helps you to build your company, whether you're a sole prop or aiming for an LLC. Not only does it help you build your company, talking about the IEN and other requirements to get your business going, but they also have contract templates for you that you can edit to your liking or to whatever needs to be customized. But not only that, they do provide legal support for you as to how you can read and understand the contracts that you're going to put in place. So that's something I want to lay out there for everyone. Zen Business is a tool that I use personally to help entrepreneurs understand contracts and gain resources to all the different contracts, like what Ray was describing earlier, all that paperwork.
Is there a price to pay for it?
There definitely is a price. It depends how you're setting up your business, but usually for limited liability companies and for convenience as well. I like to pay for convenience. So I pay a premium for convenience, in fact. So my price at that time was $400 to set up the
Mhm.
company, have them pass all the requirements, and then set up everything, and then provide me with all of those resources that I need to be able to function as a startup.
Yeah,
But it
it's
can
got
definitely go lower than that. But for me, convenience is just such a huge thing. So I did pay the premium for that.
it's gotten a whole lot easier to get services and products that provide you with everything you need to start a business and everything you need
Mhm.
when it comes to contracts. Uh, Starting an LLC, yes, is probably one of the hardest things you could have done back in the 1980s and 1990s. Now
Really?
you have programs like Zen Legal to just work on that and get it all done. I mean, I use Legal Zoom, which has been great,
I know LegalZoom. Yeah.
but I would say this that there are some barriers to entry that might some people might not be able to cross. Like for example, having like the first thought is you need to have a lot of money to start a business. You don't. You don't need a
Hmm.
lot of money to start a business. All you need is a couple of $100 in order to sign the contracts, and you need to get an EIN number, which you could actually get for free or a small fee depending on the state you live, and go to the government website and they can provide that for you without even having to pay. This is one thing that they don't even tell you, that you can actually start this process without having to pay these third party vendors to do it for you. The good thing about having a third party vendor is that you do have the resources behind. I would say I would recommend using it. I would honestly say there's people that say don't use it, but I recommend using it because they also have more resources outside of just what you're getting. Like for example, you said that there's other contracts in there that you've used that are standardized that you could probably manipulate in order to make it fit to your
Exactly.
particular business. So that to me is invaluable, and that convenience is worth its weight in gold. If you don't have to think about it, you just kind of have it, write it up, and
Yes.
that's it.
Yes. Imagine having, like, I understand, one of the most important factors as a startup owner is not about how much you earn, it's about how much you keep. And so,
Mm,
saving your resources is important. But the thing with getting a third party to help you out with these particular resources, is important resources like
mm,
contracts and putting your business together. I would say that investment is absolutely worth it, especially if you're coming from a position where you're not entirely sure what you're doing. I started out that way. I'm sure there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there who just want to get the ball rolling, but then remember that that does put yourself at risk. I consider myself one of the lucky ones where, like I said at the beginning of the episode, there were probably some times where I should have been sued, but it just didn't work out that way. And so it's extremely important for y'all to consider that these resources, paperwork, it's not just paperwork. It's not
yeah.
just boring stuff that you got to go scroll all the way down and click on agree or just sign that piece of paper. It's not about that. It's about you getting exactly what you want and need. It's about making sure that whoever you're working with is also in a winning situation like you. Contracts are there to be the lifeblood of your
Yeah.
relationships with whoever you work with.
Yeah. And man, it's such an important thing. I would say look at all the cautionary tales.
Hmm.
How many cautionary tales are out there? Uh, when I think of contracts, I think of the there's this video on YouTube with this woman that took a man to court, and no, the man took this woman to court because he sold him a car,
Okay.
and it was a $10,000 purchase, and he said, well, you can pay me $150 a month until it's paid off, 0% interest, and here's a contract. But the lady said, oh, you only said 5,000, but he recorded her and had a video of her signing the paper that said, look, this is what you agreed to. And that
Hmm.
really kind of sold the case. Done
That's the
for.
evidence.
That's the evidence. That's all you needed. There's no question. There's no arbitration. You already entered this agreement, and it's recorded. It's also on paper. You're done. Like there's nothing else you can do. Another one I do want to talk about is the show Shark Tank, right?
I do.
When an entrepreneur goes onto the show and they pledge their idea, they talk about what they're trying to sell and they're looking for an investor, and then the investor goes, I'll give you $100,000 for 40% of the company.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
another person goes, I'll give you $200,000 for 45% of the company, this percent equity, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And they go into that room and then they go deal. Do you think that is a contract, or that's a deal?
That's a deal,
you
not a
think so?
contract. Or is it verbal? You're getting somewhere.
So this is a common occurrence, especially in the show, and people don't know this. Behind the scenes, they change these contracts flat out to favor the shark, even benefit them even more. So let's say they promise you 200,000, they'll probably give you only 100,000 right after the show when they meet up with you and say for the same amount or even more equity into your company. So you got to be careful with these, especially with the verbal ones. Even with the show, it doesn't matter. They understand that, and it sells. It's weird. You can say whatever the hell you want. I could tell you, I'm going to give you 100,000, Alex. I'm going to give you $100,000 by the end of this year. Okay. That's my promise to you. I promise you, I'm going to give you all this money, and I'm going to give you 50% of my company just for whatever, I don't know, a hug.
Just for a hug?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't freaking matter. It doesn't matter what you say. It just matters what's on paper. That's what it is. And it's everything
Bottom
else
line.
Show. This is my point. Everything else is facade. Everything else is for show. Unless you get it down on paper, unless it's on contract, you sign that dotted line. That's the business. That's my kind of wrap up for
bottom line. I'm not even gonna attempt to talk about anything else, but I do love that, man. It's real when it's on paper.
Yeah,
and that's that. You know, a lot
Everything
of
on
people can
reality
make
TV.
promises. Yeah, a lot of people, like you said, a lot of people can make promises, but a lot of them end up being false promises, and you are on the wrong end of that screwdriver. So it's just a difficult thing. And the thing, especially when the way you talk about Shark Tank, I think a lot of entrepreneurs are blinded by money, like, oh shit, I'm gonna get $100,000, I'm gonna get $200,000, $500,000. That the fact that somebody is just willing to put even a penny to your idea, that can be blinding for some. And I totally understand that, because like I said earlier, you just want to get that needle moving, but then also what I said earlier, if you don't manage those contracts, it has the potential to stop the needle altogether in the future. And that's that. All right. I absolutely love this episode. I thought it was pretty funny. Making contracts sexy. Oh man. Great. Thank you for the idea. Thank you for starting the innuendos, man. we did it. We did it, brother. Thank you all for watching. Yeah. Make sure to continue tuning in to the Business Temple podcast, where we talk about the union of ancient philosophy and modern business. This is your co-host, Super Alex.
And your co-host, Super Ray, reminded you to practice safe business.
That's right. Cheers, yo. We'll see you next week. Peace.